You know, growing up, I was a pretty fearful person. Lots of anxiety seemed to just follow me. And as a young child, in the middle of the country, it seemed that we went to church a lot. And country living means that you have long rides between one church and the next. And in my family, car rides meant listening to my father's radio station the whole trip there and back. KYW News Radio, all news all the time. Anybody from Pennsylvania know that? Oh my gosh, even in Pittsburgh. Okay. The problem for me was, as a real young girl, the news was pretty ominous in the 60s. I always worried that the horrors that I was listening to in that little box in the front seat about the wars and the violence that was happening around us would end up showing up in our neck of the woods. I was certain we would be next. I'm actually getting a little nervous even as I'm telling you this. So it didn't help that the preachers in the churches that we were going to would be using these current events as the sign of the end times. I would have loved to have had the headphones that kids have now back then. I could have listened to something sweet and easygoing, soft music. Now, I imagine that the disciples wished for something similar in our story today. Jesus interrupts their wonderful day on the temple grounds with the news that catastrophe is in their future. The disciples had been taking in the beauty and the grandeur of this magnificent temple. It was massive. It towered over the folks in all its glory. And for the Hebrew people, the temple was not only a tangible symbol of God's covenant and love for them, it also gave them enormous pride in their identity as a Hebrew people who were governed by the Romans. It was central to their whole sense of who they are. Just the sight of it would give folks a sense of security, of peace, of them being able to say, we are the people of God, and surely nothing can ever destroy us, for God will let no harm come to his city and its inhabitants. But as they walked through the courtyard, among the crowd of sightseers, Jesus burst their bubble. There will be trouble ahead. And as the crowd around them oohs and ahs, the disciples hear, as for the things you are admiring, the time is coming when not even one stone will be left upon another. All of this grandeur will be demolished. And the disciples, they want to know more. They want details. When, how, and maybe even why. But it will take about 40 years until this unthinkable thing happens, when the temple is brought down and the city destroyed by the Roman army. But from that point on, life was pretty dark and fearful. If I would ask you who you trusted the most, or who or what gives you your sense of security, I imagine that you would tell me as your pastor that I put my trust in God alone, God who is unshakable, steadfast, unwavering. And yet I also imagine that you also put your trust, your security in more tangible things and in people who you can see. Have you considered what symbolizes your identity and your security? What symbolizes who you are and what gives you a sense of all will be well? Maybe not a building like the Hebrew temple, but perhaps it's your job or a certain position in your career, or maybe the goals that you have for your future have become your temple, your security. Or maybe it's an educational degree that you are working toward, or perhaps it's your children or grandchildren, maybe your family, your marriage, or perhaps your security lies in your health and fitness, and maybe even your good looks. Jesus was highlighting that all of these securities or all of these symbols of our identity can be taken away, demolished, to use his words in the Common English Bible. In our natural desire for control, we too like to know when and is there a way? How can I protect myself, my family, from calamity? Jesus didn't tell his disciples when. He didn't say things would get, but he did say things would get tougher, and that people would try to sway them, pull them into believing that they are the Christ, the one they should put their trust in. What he did stress was that their focus was to stay faithful to God's mission, not to be sidetracked, not to spend time preparing to defend themselves with the right words. He promised also that he would help them, that he would be there to give them the words to say when it was time. It kind of seems that Jesus was using their time, their sightseeing time at the temple, as a teaching moment. Jesus is aware, very aware, how his followers and society have become attached to the temporal things, forgetting what really matters. And yet, or on the other hand, what is one to do with the news of a future takeover, destruction of all that is dear to you, all that gives you a sense of security? What are you to do when it seems that your life is going to be taken away from you? You know, I continued to be fearful into my early adult years. There are times I'm have anxiety now, but not like I did before. It wasn't until things really fell apart in my life that I learned to give up and let go. When calamity came my way, I learned that I couldn't have prepared for it if I tried. I couldn't have prohibited it from happening. But looking back on it, I am so grateful that I had taken the steps to deepen my prayer life prior to this surprise calamity, and that I had strengthened my connections with friends, supportive friends, because it was the connection with the Holy Spirit within and the community of beloved friends that helped me experience joy in the midst of sorrow. We are in post-election days. I think it's totally post now, isn't it? Yeah. And many of us have had our hearts set on a certain candidate to be elected, maybe a couple of them, one that would save us, that would protect us. But we all know, if we really think about it, that it really takes those of us in the local community to make a difference in our world's problems, our world's needs. It takes a beloved community to help make the transformation of all that we value so that all can feel that they belong. It will involve all of us, each of us, to do our part. Since Tuesday's election, I have heard some winners use some church talk in their post-election interviews. The phrase community building came up a couple times. Phrases like bringing people together and lifting each other up and improving each other's lives. These same candidates spoke to the value of meeting their constituents door to door, face to face, and listening to their needs, asking the connecting questions, really caring, and asking them what they needed so that they could flourish in their day-to-day life. These candidates were community builders. You and I are called to be compassionate community builders. And something we need to remember that when disasters do happen, when tribulations do come, those who are already on the margins of life experience the trials more acutely than the privileged inner folks, the inner circle folks. And so we need to be ever so vigilant in reaching out and attending to those who don't have a sure sense that they belong now or that they are belonging when tragedy happens. We need to check in with each other. I was reminded in the different interactions this week how important and valuable ordinary actions are. I was sat with the Women of Spirit on Wednesday. It's an ecumenical women's group that meets here on Wednesdays in our fellowship hall. And they were making Thanksgiving crafts to be placed on the food trays, the meal trays at a local nursing home. Something so simple. Decorative, yes, but simple and ordinary, and those little things are going to bring joy to so many people who are caught living in the nursing home. When their food tray comes, it won't just be a napkin, but there'll be something there that says, "Hi, someone thought of you." For us to be change makers, we will need to be faithful in the little things. Because the work of transformation, the work of holistic spiritual change begins with the ordinary. So I invite you to consider developing compassionate curiosity, to develop relationships with your family members, the next door neighbors, the church folks, because as we ask those little questions beyond how are you, it will help us maintain our mental health. Psychologist Jillian Sandstrom writes that we need to strengthen our small talk skills. Ask open questions that lead to something beyond the "good morning, how are you?" It doesn't have to be deep. It has to be caring. Despite the fact that so many people say they dislike making small talk, it turns out that even those people who say they don't like it, talking to a stranger or acquaintances, it actually will enrich your life. I invite you to try it. I bet it will even bring you joy. Truth is, I have learned, I've always been a small talk person. If you run into me on the plane, I'm going to say, "Hi, how are you?" and go on further. But I have learned my small talk, the value of small talk at Trader Joe's, the one here on Greenway, on the Green Parkway. If you go to that Trader Joe's, you won't get out of there without somebody not just saying, "How are you?" but they're curious about why you decided to choose this certain kind of cheese. Or they'll say, "Have you tried it with this?" Now, we're not going to become best friends. We're not going to go out to eat. I'm not worried about them stalking me. I am just like having this connection, and I leave that place happy. Happy. No, I can't buy some things in Trader Joe's that you can get at the big box store, but there's connection. Another ordinary act of love and transformation, and this is a big one for all of us: do not complain. I recently read that complaining is boring, and it doesn't fix anything. It actually stifles change. Complaining distracts us from healthy, helpful actions. It hinders the formation of a beloved community. And I am publicly asking Brian and Lena to call me on it when I complain. I don't complain about them. I might complain about something. Have somebody in your life call you on it when you're complaining. It doesn't help. And along that same line, don't compare. Don't compare the good old days to life now. Don't compare pre-COVID to now. Comparison, as Theodore Roosevelt said, is the thief of joy. It steals us away from satisfaction. I invite you today to take care not to get caught up in the speculations of the future calamities in our world. Don't spend your energy trying to figure out the prophesying games that you may hear. Rather, react to these hard times as Jesus calls us to, by living out the gospel of love. Or, as the Talmud says, do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly with your God now. You're not obligated to complete that work, but you are neither free to abandon it. The ordinary things have power. A compassionate word spoken at just the right moment, or a simple smile, or a gentle touch, a thoughtful gift, an offered hand are ordinary things, but will have big results, bigger than we know. As I'm sharing this with you now, I'm thinking of Jesus and Zacchaeus. What a simple thing Jesus did. Just walked up and said, "Hi, I want to go to your house." And what a change. It's in the heart. Connection. Transformation begins with what seems ordinary. And in all these ordinary things, God indeed is present, and God is working change. Thanks be to God. Amen.